Welcome back to the Southern Millennial Mom podcast. I am Samantha May, and I am your official Southern Millennial Mom. As always, thank you so much to all of my returning listeners. I do appreciate you listening to me each new episode rant, ramble, reminisce, and everything else. To all of the new listeners, welcome. There are a few episodes that you have missed, but that is just fine. You can always pause this and go back to episode 1. Let me introduce me. Because I think it's important for anybody that starts a podcast to introduce themselves so that you get to know them, what they believe, who they are, and all that good stuff. For a quick disclaimer and general FYI, this podcast is not sponsored by any brand, company, product, or business. If I talk about something, it's because I either like or dislike it, and it is my personal opinion. If that changes, y'all will be the first to know. After my husband, of course. No minor's legal name will be mentioned in this podcast unless I or any future guests have permission from the parent or guardian or from a minor old enough to understand what using their legal name on the internet could entail. For a quick recap of the previous episode, Let's Plan a Party, I talk about planning your kids' birthday parties. Whether it's their first or their 18th, these are things that I thought these tips and tricks and recommendations are things that I wish other people had talked to me about or recommended to me about for planning birthday parties for my own child. A couple things that I emphasize is involving your kid when they are old enough to do so. And also, you don't have to have a party every year. It's great. Everybody loves a party. But sometimes it can just be an intimate gathering of a few people or just the family. Now, I know it's been a while since that episode, and I apologize. Life has gotten busy. I have just not been felt as inspired as I was last year, and that's fine. It happens. And I have come out with a few episodes since the break I took, the Let's Talk About Bullies and Let's Plan a Party, but those came out of necessity and what was currently going on in my life. And if you want to hear what those are about, I highly recommend that you pause this and go check them out. But let's get into this episode. Obviously, you can tell I'm going to be talking about kids and cell phones. Mostly the rules that I recommend you having for your kid's first cell phone. And these are the rules that we are enforcing on our daughter who just got her first cell phone. So let's get into it. My husband and I have been talking really since my daughter has noticed whenever her friends started getting cell phones. He and I have been talking about, what age is appropriate and what actual kind of phone is appropriate for those specific ages. We had mostly agreed at the age of when she's old enough to drive and have a job, or when she is old enough to be away from us for extended periods of time, and neither one of us are in close proximity to her. Whether it's school trips, extracurricular activity things, having a job, going out with friends, those were the things that we took into account. And last year, she joined the school band. And as someone who doesn't play the flute but was in band, I think she's pretty good at her instrument. And the band director thought so too, because this year he moved her up to the high school band, which marches during the football games, goes to marching and concert band competitions, as well as a plethora of other things. And this year was her first experience for band camp, which means for 2 weeks, the weekdays, not the whole week, she would be away from the house for several hours a day. My husband and I would have to drop her off and pick her up. Yes, before anybody can say anything, they did have lunch breaks. The camp did not supply her with food, but she could take something, or during that lunch break period, they could come home and get something. It's a very well thought out band camp experience. And yes, get the jokes out. I've heard them before because I had to go through them. But this was her first experience away from home other than summer camp, where she had access to a phone other than the camp office phone. She had friends that moved up with her from the beginner band from last year, and she had made friends with the other band students because this kid will make friends with a tree. It is unbelievable. She is the complete opposite when it comes to socializing with physical people than I am. It was the first week of camp. I had been trying all day to come up with notes for a new episode for the podcast, and in this time, the Do Not Disturb feature came on. It goes off at a specific time because that's the time that we start to wind down, and I don't want any notifications from apps, social media, text messages, or phone calls at the certain point. Now, obviously you can set it that if, someone calls multiple times, it'll come through the do not disturb and the text messages. And for the first couple of days of band camp, I shut it off. But unfortunately, on this particular day, I got distracted and forgot to shut it off because at this point, she still, during the first half of the week, she did not have her phone yet. But I told my husband, what time he needed to leave to go pick her up. I don't know if she called him on his way to go pick her up, or she told him when he got there. But when they come home, he comes into the office and tells me to look at my phone. I'm like, okay, why? He's just look at your phone. I see I have 3 missed calls, a few missed text messages from unknown numbers, and she has been using another friend's phone to call or text us to let us know that camp has ended. And because I had been distracted and forgot to shut off my do not disturb, I did not get those messages, those phone calls. I felt like the worst mother in the world. I call her into my office and I apologize. And with the big heart my daughter has, she forgives me. And that's the end of it. So we all go get ready for bed. And my husband obviously asked me why I didn't pick up the phone or check my messages. And I told him the do not disturb is set for this specific time, and I just didn't get any of them. Now, obviously, because she knows my number, I'm the first person that she calls because I'm typically the person to drop her off and pick her up from somewhere. Since my husband has to be at work or do stuff early in the mornings to mid-afternoon, sometimes really late in the evenings. And my daughter knows this, but my daughter also knows my husband's number. And I should have talked to her more that if she can't get me the first couple of calls, then she needs to call her dad. And apparently that day, camp had ended early, and that's why she was calling and texting just me instead of calling or texting her dad after me not picking up after the first calls or texts. My husband and I get ready for bed. I tell him the do not disturb story. I changed the do not disturb to a later time, but we really get into the conversation of her getting her first cell phone. And then we start thinking about, what's the best phone for her to have? What's the best plan to use? We found a couple of kid teen safe phones that have safety filters in them because they were smartphones and you could have picture and video messaging and stuff like that, which, is not a necessity, but it's fun to have. But they weren't on a typical phone plan. And we just couldn't get into them. So the next day, my husband's in Walmart for something, goes by the electronics, and then calls me and says, why don't we get her a prepaid cell phone? I'm like, that could work, because they had prepaid cell phones in our network. So my husband gets a phone, comes home, tries to set it up, can't set it up, so he takes it back and gets another one. Finally able to set it up, get her a phone number. Now Boo has her first official cell phone and rules for the cell phone. And the phone that she ended up getting was an old school flip phone with the button. And if you grew up in the era of the button cell phones, you understand the struggle of typing out all your text messages with it and the predictive text learning the words that you might want to use. And she got that because, one, we didn't want her to have a smartphone, since we love the features of those kid teen safe ones. We love those features, but we just couldn't get into them, so we couldn't get them. We didn't get them. And two is because she does not need access to any type of social media, anything that has direct messaging, where not only we have direct contact with her, but strangers on the internet will. And she's one of those kids that no filter, no understanding, that you can't tell people certain things, like, what your house looks like, what your address is, things like that. And it's not that we kept her sheltered. It's that I didn't know how to explain it to her when she was younger. So she's learning all of that now. And really, what 13-year-old needs access, 13 or younger needs access to TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram? None. Yes, it is great to be able to scroll through the videos, catch up with family and friends. I understand the pull of them because I have them. But I am an adult, and I understand limitations and boundaries. Does Boo have access to YouTube? Yes, but she does not have an account. And she knows what is age appropriate and what isn't. Do I have to occasionally tell her not to watch certain things? Yes. Because unless you've seen a video before, you don't know what's going to happen. This is the primary reason why I won't let my daughter watch TikTok videos with me unless I've seen it before. But like I said, she does not have an actual account to post anything. And most of the stuff that she watches are fan stories of Pokemon or Minecraft story times and things like that. Things that are age appropriate and what has been cultivated into her feed. Do some things slip in? Yes. Because the algorithm wants to suggest similar things by different creators, which is fine. That's how people get views, get followers, subscribers, things like that. I'm not going to fault an algorithm for showing or allowing a certain video to come up on my daughter's feed because it suggested something similar from a different creator. But we didn't want her to have access to all those social media platforms where, like I said, strangers on the internet have instant access to her. So if you are thinking of getting your child their first cell phone, the first thing I recommend, get them the oldest phone that you can afford that is actually usable. And two, maybe even do what we did and get a prepaid phone so that you can limit their usage on the phone itself. And if they whine and complain about not getting a smartphone or things like that, remind them that it's a privilege. It's not a necessity, especially if you're always with them and the only time they're away is with family or trusted family friends that have phones they can use to contact you. Now, on to the rules that we have for Boo and her phone and why we have those specific rules. And I'll explain why we made those rules. Rule number 1, no phone in the bedroom when it's time to get ready for bed. Rule number 2, the phone charges on the breakfast bar at night. Rule number 3, when asked for the phone, hand it over immediately. Rule number 4, do not give your number out to anyone without our permission. Rule number 5, if someone asks to use your phone to call or text someone they know they aren't supposed to, or has their number blocked, do not let them. Rule number 6, no using the phone during school hours unless it's an absolute emergency. Rule number 7, if you have taken care of the phone for a full year, you can get an upgrade. Some of these rules bleed into each other, and some of these rules put in place for her safety, whether physically, mentally, or emotionally. Now, you don't have to do this when you give your kids their cell phones and the list of rules you have, but I highly encourage that you explain why the rules are put into place so that they will be less likely to break them because they know the purpose behind it. Basically, kind of like telling your kid when they're real little not to touch hot things because they may get burned. It helps them understand why the rule is in place. So, rule 1, no phone in the bedroom when it's time to get ready for bed. I know this does not seem logical to a lot of parents, but as a parent to a teenager who is young, like I said, naive, and terrible at time management, this rule works for her. This way, she is not getting distracted by text messages, calls, and she doesn't have to get ready for bed at bedtime. She can get ready for bed before we even have dinner if she wants. But this will also help her later on when she gets a smartphone, because that's probably going to be inevitable, so that she doesn't need to have her phone with her all the time. And we all know the stories of inappropriate things being sent or asked for on the phone. We've heard the stories. We've done it ourselves. There are very few people that can say that they have not. But anyways, this will help a child understand they don't need to be stuck to their phone 24/7, and it'll separate them from the world to start decompressing from their day. When she gets older, we will leave that decision to her. Hopefully, she will keep doing this, and it will also keep her from staying up late at night talking and texting to friends, which leads into rule 2. The phone charges on the breakfast bar at night. Now, I know not everybody has a breakfast bar. A lot of houses are different, a lot are similar. But for her, like I said, I don't want her to be up until the wee hours of the morning talking to her friends or relatives when she should be asleep, getting the rest she needs. And believe it or not, she needs more sleep than we do. Hence why we try to go to bed at a reasonable hour, because she, like us, gets up at an early hour while it's still dark. And our breakfast bar happens to have some outlets that are closer to the floor than the bar itself. But like I said, this rule is for her right now. And I encourage parents to have this rule of having the phone charge outside of the bedroom when they get their first cell phone, mostly so that they can understand how to handle their time management for bedtime. Because again, if your child has a smartphone, they could be scrolling the internet, talking who knows who, and doing who knows what. And it is just a good rule for physically immature and mentally immature young kids. Hopefully this, again, teach our child. She doesn't need to be attached to her phone 24/7. Rule number 3. When asked for the phone, hand it over immediately. Yes, this may trigger some people hearing this rule because they probably had parents that had absolutely no trust in them whatsoever, and they were constantly checking their phones. We do not constantly check Boo's phone, but we have reared a pretty decent kid who, if she's having a problem with something or she's concerned about something, she will just come to us to talk to us about it because we make her feel heard. But there are those times when she does hide things from us because she doesn't want to get in trouble or she doesn't know how to handle talking to us about a particular subject. But this rule is more for us because we've heard too many stories of people talking to children who have no right talking to children, and stories of significant others cheating on their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and hiding it on their phones. And we don't want our daughter to feel like she needs to hide anything. So if she ever, says, wait, let me check something real quick, we know she's trying to hide something. And that will be an immediate phone taken away punishment because she shouldn't feel like she needs to hide something from us unless it's a surprise gift that she's looking at and she doesn't want us to see that particular parent who asked to see it. And I think what we will do, if she ever does that, and we will say, okay, if you don't want me to see it, and I haven't talked about this with my husband yet, but I will. If you don't want me to see it, let your dad see it or let your mom see it. But those stories about predators, talking to kids, grooming them, things like that, are really what that rule is for. Even if she doesn't have a smartphone, there may be some kind of spam caller and she answers a text, answers the phone, and they get to talking and things like that. We don't want that to happen to her, even without a smartphone. And to be completely honest with you, she is 13 years old. She barely knows how to set boundaries. She does know how to do it, but barely. And she's not very wise in the way of the world yet. She hasn't experienced a lot of things. So yes, it may be an invasion of her privacy, but we do it to protect her. And we don't just do it to invade her privacy. We will explain to her why we do it. Because again, we want her to understand why the rules are in place. And I am telling you this again and again and again. Have open communication with your children so that they don't feel like these rules are being put on them just because. And we hated that when our parents did that. We hated when mom or dad said, because I said so. There are times when it is appropriate to say that, but there are times when you are just being a lazy parent and not wanting to have to explain yourself. And I'm speaking to myself as well as to you, the parent, the future parent. And this is not just a rule put in place for strangers on the internet. This is for people in her real life, her peers, family members, things like this, because we don't know what's going on in the lives around us unless we, know. So I want her to be safe. Her dad wants her to be safe. So this is why this rule is put into place, for her safety. And like I said previously about significant others, there are so many stories, either in our personal lives or that we have heard or read on the internet, where someone has found on their significant other's phone proof of them cheating. This rule will hopefully stick, and if her significant other ever has doubts, which if they're with her, they shouldn't, but sometimes it happens, that if they ask to see her phone, she will just hand it over her, because people that are hiding things will not hand over proof that they are hiding things. This is what my husband and I do. We have that open phone policy. We know each other's passcodes. We can look through each other's phones and, piddle around on their phones. But we know if we ask the other for their phone, that it's just going to be handed over. Rule number 4, do not give your number out to anyone without our permission. Now, this rule is set for her currently and maybe for another year or so, because this child, this blessed child of mine, is very naive and does not understand that not everyone that asks needs her phone number. She does understand age appropriateness, and we have talked to her about people asking for inappropriate things. So, what she can do, she does not have to give somebody her number. She can get their number. Come home, talk to us, tell us about them. If we know their parents, if we've met them, and most of the time, anytime she's asked to give people her number, it's been a yes. Because it is people we've met, we have interacted with. It is family that we trust. It is friends that we trust. People that we know will take care of her, that will respond to a phone call because of an emergency or anything else. If it is somebody that we don't know, obviously we would like to meet them, get to know them, get a feel for them and the personalities and things like this. And we hope that this rule will encourage her to be wise on who she gives her phone number to in the future. And we hope that she doesn't fall for the "I lost my phone, can I call my phone with yours so that I can find it" trick, and it mysteriously was in their back pocket or somewhere within easy reach. And I have to talk to her now that I'm thinking about it. If somebody does use this trick to try to get her number, even though she has told them that she can't give it without our permission, I will have to tell her that if they need help finding their phone and they use hers to call it, that she sees them delete it from their recent calls. Appreciate it. Thank you. Now, moving on to rule number 5. If somebody has to use your phone to call or text someone they know they aren't supposed to, or they know has them blocked, do not let them. Okay, so this one, we've either had people or known people that have been in a relationship as kids that their parents have nixed, whether for good reasons or even bad reasons. And they've used somebody else's phone. So if their parent checks their phone, that they can see, oh, I didn't call them, I didn't text them, but they used somebody else's phone. We've either had friends do that, we've done that ourselves, and I do not want my daughter caught in between the drama of the parent and this child. And when it comes to somebody they know has them blocked, it could be for a very good reason. Or it could be because that other person is petty and they're trying to punish the one wanting to use her phone. I don't want her in that drama either. And as she becomes older, I want her to understand she is not responsible for other people's drama. She does not have to be the scapegoat or the middleman between this person wanting to use her phone and the person they're trying to contact. And this is definitely one where you have to be careful with your kids. If you don't want this same scenario to happen, you don't want your kids caught up in that drama. And yes, it's fun to hear about. You know, we all love drama. Well, we all love other people's drama. But don't allow your kids to be caught up in it unless they have a good reason to. And sometimes their friends, or even my daughter's friends, are going to get mad at her for not letting them use her phone. And until she gets old enough to understand why the rule is in place, this is a rule that I will highly enforce. And I hope she learns that responsibility and is able to feel whether somebody is being genuine about trying to contact somebody and not just doing it to be petty or to get her in trouble with somebody else. Rule number 6 is an obvious rule for school-aged kids. Rule number 6 is no using the phone during school hours unless it's an absolute emergency. Now, if you got your phone in high school, you knew, or you did it yourself, you knew kids that did not follow this rule. That they're playing games on their phone, they're listening to music during class time on their Bluetooth headphones or texting, things like this. Obviously there are teachers out there that are fine with their students being on their phone, but only after they have completed their classwork. Now, with my daughter, I think she may forget sometimes that she has a cell phone until maybe somebody says something about their phone, or they bring out their phone, or even when that end of school bell rings. And I think and some of the reasons why I allow her to take her phone to school with her is in case there is an unexpected band practice, or if she joins a sport later on, an unexpected practice. The biggest reason is if there is an incident at school and somebody in the office is unable to contact all the parents. I want her to be able to get in contact with me safely if something happens. And I think all parents have this rule for their kids. At least I hope so. And my daughter at least, we have raised her to be honest and understand bad decisions have consequences. And her pulling out her phone to text her friends or even to text us is a bad decision, especially since the school has a rule where if they catch you with your phone, you get a warning, or at least a couple warnings, and then you start getting fined for it. And each time you get caught with it, it is a bigger fine. And of course, if they get caught, it does get taken away and they don't get it for the rest of the day. And really, nobody wants to have to pay $50 to get their kid's cell phone back, or a kid have to take money from their paycheck to get it back. A phone is a privilege for your kid, especially one not old enough to drive, to work, to be somewhere without adult supervision, and things like that. It's a privilege. And that is something that we have to remind our kids. It is something I have to remind my daughter, that her tablet, her phone now, her Switch, and all the things that she has are privileges, are luxuries. They're not necessities, but she's privileged to have them. And if she breaks any of the rules that we have set for her, she gets these privileges taken away, which leads into rule number 7. If you've taken care of your phone for a full year, you will get an upgrade. She does not have a smartphone, as I've said before. She has that old school flip phone with the buttons, and she really has to work at sending messages. She's pretty decent at making a phone call, saying hello, goodbye, I love you, things like that. But this child takes after me so much that gravity is not her friend. She is constantly dropping things. It is like gravity has it out for us. And I'll be doing something on my phone or just holding my phone, talking to somebody, and all of a sudden, bloop, my phone falls out of my hand. Like, what the heck? And she's been known to drop her tablet. Yes, it is in a protective case. She has dropped her Switch. She has left her Switch in places in the car. And if you know anything about living in the South, it gets freaking hot in a car with windows rolled up, even with windows rolled down, and no access to any kind of shade. It gets freaking hot, which can damage electronics. And if somebody says I'm wrong, they're wrong. I have seen it happen. in my personal life and also on the internet. So we have to teach our kids to take care of their things, to remind them every day. Well, maybe not every day because that can get annoying, but remind our kids often enough how privileged they are to have a phone, to have a tablet, to have a gaming system, to have access to the internet. When she proves to us that she's responsible for this privilege, she will get an upgrade. And yes, this is more of a goal than a rule. But if this rule gets broken constantly, she will still have the same phone that she had for that full year. She will not get the privilege of having a newer phone. Like I said before, when you hand your child their very first phone, remind them it is not their phone. It is your phone. You are the one paying for the insurance on it, the cell phone bill, whatever money is coming from your accounts to pay for the care and usage of this phone. And that they have to take care of it. If they don't take care of it, either they are stuck with a same old boring phone, or it is your phone to take away from them until they can prove they can take care of something else, or that they are responsible enough for a phone. And this is a big responsibility for kids. And the rules you set in place should not be overly harsh, overly restrictive. If you feel like you have been raising your child correctly and they are not prone to constantly getting in trouble because they think they can do whatever they want without consequence, give them freedom with the phone, but limited. That is all the rules that we have for Boo. I hope these rules were helpful for anybody struggling with the decision on whether or not to get their child a phone, or if they are constantly struggling and arguing with their child about their phone usage. And you can use these rules, change these rules, add on to these rules however you want to. These are just my recommendations for you. My feelings won't be hurt if you don't use any of this advice that I'm giving. I hope something in this episode was helpful. And before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow so you can get notifications on new episode drops or updates of the podcast. If you have any questions, stories of your own, or recommendation of topics you'd like me to talk about, you can send all of those to southernmillennialmoms@gmail.com. That's southernmillennialmoms@gmail.com. All social media links for the podcast will be in the description of this episode. I hope you have a great whatever time of day you're listening to this. And have a great day. I love you. Bye.